You won't believe how one unexpected person turned her whole world upside down. She was young, lost in the quiet routines of a life that felt like it was passing her by. Her days were all the same, quiet, uneventful, and painfully lonely. But everything began to change the moment her mother's friends started showing up more often. What began as small talk in the kitchen slowly turned into something deeper, something no one saw coming. In this video, we'll uncover a story that's rarely told, an intense emotional journey between a young woman and someone she never imagined would matter so much. You'll see how an ordinary life can twist into something unforgettable, how love can bloom in the most unexpected corners, and how one person's presence can awaken feelings buried deep inside. Stay with us until the end to witness the turning points, the heartbreaks, and the quiet moments that speak louder than words. This isn't just a story of connection, it's a story about discovering who you are through someone else's eyes. Welcome to our channel, where we bring you powerful, faceless stories that feel real. If this kind of storytelling speaks to you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new release. Now let's begin. The young woman's routine hadn't changed much. She still lived in the same small house with her mother, still spent most of her time alone. But things felt different now. Her mother's friend had started coming around more often. At first, it was just for tea or an occasional dinner. But then, those visits began to stretch longer, sometimes staying until late in the evening, talking about everything from childhood memories to life's challenges. She wasn't sure why, but every time her mother's friend was there, she felt alive. There was something calming about the way she spoke, something grounding about the way she made her feel seen. There was no pretending, no small talk, just real, raw conversations. The young woman started looking forward to these moments. As her mother got lost in her own world of work and obligations, the woman found herself turning to her mother's friend for something her mother could no longer give her: attention. One afternoon, her mother's friend brought over a small, well-worn book, a poetry collection that had been passed down through generations. She shared the lines with the young woman, who, despite her initial disinterest, found herself intrigued by the beautiful words that captured feelings she had long buried. They would sit together for hours, reading passages out loud, analyzing meanings, and sharing their own thoughts on love and life. Slowly, a bridge formed between them, built from the shared experiences of two very different lives that had both felt disconnected at times. It wasn't just the books or the poetry. There was something more. Her mother's friend had an uncanny way of listening. Not just hearing the words, but listening to the silences between them, understanding the unspoken things. The young woman began to realize that her life had been defined by this quiet emptiness. She was always surrounded by people, but never truly heard asterisk. But with her mother's friend, it was different. She felt seen, in a way that she hadn't before. There were moments when her heart felt heavy, moments when she was unsure of where her life was headed, of what she truly wanted. And in those moments, the woman was there. She would offer gentle words of reassurance, her hand placed lightly on her shoulder, as though to say, "You're not alone. I see you. I understand." Asterisk. The young woman hadn't realized how much she needed that until now. But with every passing day, the young woman found herself feeling something more than gratitude, more than friendship. It was subtle at first, a glance that lingered a little too long, a touch that felt more intimate than it should have. Her heart started to beat faster when her mother's friend was near, and she found herself looking forward to her visits in a way that went beyond the comfort of shared conversation. Her mind raced with thoughts she didn't understand. Was this just a fleeting feeling? Or was it something more? It was impossible to ignore, and yet, impossible to fully understand. She fought the growing connection. She told herself that it was just admiration, just a natural bond between two people who understood each other. But the more she tried to convince herself, the stronger the pull became. As the days passed, the young woman found herself questioning everything. She was torn between the comfort she felt when she was with her mother's friend and the guilt that followed whenever her thoughts strayed too far. Was this normal? Asterisk. Her mother's friend had always been a part of her life, a constant figure from her childhood. She had always been there for her mother, but now, it felt different. There was no denying that something had shifted. And as much as the young woman tried to dismiss it, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the verge of discovering something that could change everything. The confusion mixed with a strange sense of excitement, a fear of what this meant, yet an undeniable curiosity. She wasn't ready to confront it, not yet. But she knew deep down that the connection was growing stronger, and sooner or later, it would have to be addressed. One evening, as the young woman and her mother's friend sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, their conversation took a turn. They began talking about their childhoods, the struggles, the losses, the dreams they once had. The wind blew softly around them, carrying away the weight of their words, leaving only the connection between them. Her mother's friend looked at her, her eyes soft and understanding, and in that moment, everything changed. The young woman felt a warmth spread through her chest, an emotion she hadn't been prepared for. Her mother's friend smiled faintly and said, "You've always been so full of potential. I see you in a way no one else does. And it's beautiful." That was it. In those few words, the young woman felt seen, not just as the quiet, overlooked girl she had always been, but as someone with worth, with depth. For a brief moment, the world outside of their small bubble didn't matter. It was just them, two souls that had somehow found each other in a world full of noise. And for the first time in a long time, the young woman felt truly alive. The connection between them had only just begun, and with it came the promise of something more, something that neither of them could escape. The days that followed felt different. Every interaction with her mother's friend seemed charged with a new energy, an undercurrent of something neither of them could ignore. The young woman tried to convince herself that it was just the poetry, the deep conversations, they had always shared these moments, hadn't they? But this time, it felt more intense. Her heart fluttered every time her mother's friend entered the room. It wasn't just her presence anymore, it was the way she looked at her, the way her smile seemed to hold a world of understanding that no one else had ever given her. The way her voice would soften when they spoke, as though her words were meant for her alone. The young woman tried to keep her feelings in check. She buried them deep inside, telling herself it was nothing more than the closeness they had developed. But every time their hands brushed, every time her mother's friend's gaze lingered just a second too long, it became harder to deny. One evening, they were sitting in the living room, the soft light from the lamp casting shadows on the walls. They talked about everything and nothing, life, love, the future. And yet, with every passing word, the young woman felt herself drawn to her more than ever before. Her heart raced as the conversation shifted, as her mother's friend leaned a little closer, as their eyes met and held for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. She could feel it, the unspoken connection, the tension that simmered just beneath the surface. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, it was electric. And then, without thinking, the young woman did something she would never have dared to do before. She reached out, her fingers brushing against her mother's friend's hand. It was a small gesture, barely noticeable, but it sent a shock through her. Her mother's friend didn't pull away. Instead, she held her gaze, as if waiting for the young woman to say something, to explain the feeling that hung in the air. But there were no words. There didn't need to be. They sat like that for a moment, their hands barely touching, but the connection between them was undeniable. The young woman's breath caught in her throat as her mother's friend gently squeezed her hand. It was an innocent gesture, yet it felt like a promise. In that moment, everything shifted. The young woman's world tilted slightly, as though the ground beneath her was no longer solid. She pulled her hand away quickly, as if to deny what had just happened. But the feeling lingered, the warmth of her mother's friend's touch still tingled on her skin, and the young woman couldn't help but feel like something had just begun, a story that had no clear ending but one that she couldn't turn away from. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. Was it a mistake, a fleeting moment, or was there something more? For days, the young woman avoided her mother's friend, unsure of what to say, unsure of how to face her after that touch. But every time they crossed paths, it became harder to ignore the pull between them. Her mother's friend seemed to know something was wrong, her eyes always searching for something the young woman wasn't ready to confront. Then, one evening, when they were sitting on the porch again, watching the sunset, her mother's friend finally broke the silence. "You've been distant," she said quietly, her voice soft, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. "What's going on, my dear?" The young woman hesitated. She couldn't keep running from the truth. She couldn't keep pretending that nothing had changed. "I don't know," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think I'm confused. About everything. About you. About me." Her mother's friend remained silent for a moment, her gaze steady but gentle. "It's okay to be confused. You're not the only one." The words hung in the air between them, and the young woman felt a weight lift from her chest. She wasn't alone in this, she wasn't the only one feeling something she didn't fully understand. Her mother's friend reached over, her hand resting lightly on the young woman's, the touch familiar and comforting. Whatever it is you're feeling, you don't have to face it alone. We'll figure it out together. The young woman felt a surge of relief and fear all at once. She didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time, she felt like she wasn't drowning in her confusion. She wasn't lost anymore. She had someone who understood, someone who saw her in a way no one else ever had. They sat in silence for a while, the warmth of the evening surrounding them. The young woman didn't have all the answers, and she didn't know where this connection with her mother's friend would lead. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe again. And in that moment, she realized something important. The confusion, the uncertainty, it was part of the journey. And maybe, just maybe, it was a journey she wasn't meant to take alone. As they sat there together, the young woman felt a quiet sense of peace settle in her chest. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she was ready to embrace whatever came next. The next chapter in her life was about to begin, and it was more than just a story of love. It was a story of self-discovery, of finding a connection that was deeper than anything she had ever known. And no matter where it would lead, she knew she wasn't alone anymore. The days after that conversation were quieter, but no less intense. The young woman couldn't shake the feeling of her mother's friend's touch lingering on her skin, nor the way her words had settled in her heart. We'll figure it out together. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that. How much she had been craving reassurance, someone to help guide her through the storm of emotions she had no words for. But now that the words had been spoken, there was no going back. She could feel the path ahead of her unfolding, though she had no idea where it would lead. Her interactions with her mother's friend had shifted, though neither of them addressed the underlying tension directly. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a recognition of the connection that had grown too strong to ignore. Yet, there was still an unspoken barrier, a line neither of them dared to cross just yet. The young woman often caught herself watching her mother's friend when she thought she wasn't looking. She would find herself memorizing the small details, the way her fingers gently tapped on the table when she spoke, the softness in her eyes when she smiled. The attraction was undeniable, but so was the fear. The fear of what it would mean if they let it go any further, of what might happen to their relationship, to her life, to everything they knew. One evening, after dinner, the young woman found herself sitting with her mother's friend on the porch again, the fading light casting long shadows. The quiet seemed heavier this time, more filled with expectation. Neither of them spoke immediately, each waiting for the other to say something. Finally, her mother's friend broke the silence, her voice soft but certain. "I think we both know what this is," she said, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The young woman felt her heart skip a beat. The weight of the moment hung heavy between them, and she struggled to find the right words. "What do you mean?" she asked, though she knew exactly what her mother's friend was referring to. Her mother's friend turned to face her, her expression unreadable. "I don't know what you're feeling, but I can't deny what I feel. And I know it's complicated." The young woman's chest tightened. She wanted to say something, to explain how her heart had been racing, how she had never felt this way before, but she couldn't find the words. She was afraid that if she spoke the truth, everything would change forever, and she wasn't sure she was ready for that. Her mother's friend leaned forward, her eyes searching the young woman's face. "You don't have to say anything. I just want you to know that I'm here. No matter what happens, we'll face it together." The warmth in her voice was both comforting and terrifying. The young woman wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that no matter where this led, they could navigate it together. But deep down, she feared that what they were feeling was too powerful, too dangerous to ignore. There was a long silence as they sat together, the evening air cool against their skin. The young woman's mind raced with the possibilities, but there was one thing she couldn't deny. She had never felt more alive than she did in this moment, sitting next to someone who made her feel understood in ways no one else ever had. The next few days passed in a blur. The young woman found herself walking a tightrope, constantly aware of the unspoken tension between her and her mother's friend. She couldn't look at her without feeling a rush of emotions, a confusing mix of excitement, longing, and fear. It was as if they were standing on the edge of something too powerful to control, and the only question was whether they would take that final step or pull back. It wasn't until a rainy afternoon, when the world outside seemed to mirror her internal chaos, that the young woman found herself sitting alone in the living room, staring out the window. The soft patter of rain against the glass seemed to calm her racing thoughts, but she still couldn't shake the overwhelming feelings that had consumed her since that moment on the porch. She couldn't keep pretending that nothing had changed. She had to face it, whatever it was. She needed answers, even if those answers came at a cost. Her heart pounded in her chest when the door opened, and she saw her mother's friend step inside, shaking off the rain. The familiar feeling of warmth flooded her chest, and before she could stop herself, she stood up and walked toward her. "I need to talk," the young woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother's friend looked up at her, her eyes soft with understanding. "I know, we both do." They sat down on the couch together, the space between them charged with the weight of unspoken words. The young woman took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. "I don't know what this is," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "But I can't keep pretending like I don't feel it. Like I'm not falling for you." Her mother's friend didn't pull away. Instead, she reached out and placed her hand on the young woman's. Her touch was gentle, reassuring, but there was a flicker of something else in her eyes, something the young woman couldn't quite place. "I don't know what to do with this, either," her mother's friend admitted, her voice low. "But I care about you. I have for a long time." The young woman's heart raced, the words filling her with a mix of relief and fear. She had said it aloud, admitted it to herself, and now, there was no going back. "I don't want to lose you," the young woman whispered. Her mother's friend squeezed her hand. "You won't. No matter what happens, you won't lose me. But we need to figure out where this goes. Together." For the first time in what felt like forever, the young woman allowed herself to believe it. There was a way forward. There was a way to face the future, no matter how complicated it might be. And for the first time, she didn't feel so alone. The rain outside seemed to quiet, the storm passing, leaving only the two of them in the calm. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear, they were in this together. And that, for the young woman, was enough. The days after that night felt like a fever dream, everything moving too quickly and yet standing still at the same time. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were teetering on the edge of something we couldn't control, but every time Elena was near, every time her eyes met mine, the world seemed to shrink until all that existed was her. There was no pretending anymore. We had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The moments we spent together, whether in silence or with soft words shared between us, were more than I could handle, and yet I craved them. I couldn't keep my distance from her, not when she was the only thing I could think about. I would see her across the room, her smile that seemed to hold a secret, the way she moved, and my heart would ache with longing. But there was no room for that longing in the real world. The outside world, my dad, our family, society, everything was against what was happening between us. I knew this was wrong. I knew that if anyone found out, it could destroy everything. And yet, I found it harder and harder to care. One afternoon, my dad was out again, and the house was eerily quiet. Elena was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine, looking completely at ease. But there was tension in the air, the same tension that had been building between us for weeks. She looked up and caught my gaze. For a moment, neither of us said anything. We just stared at each other, like we were waiting for the other to speak first. Finally, Elena broke the silence. "We need to talk." Her voice was calm, but I could hear the edge of something in it. Something that made my heart beat faster, made my hands tremble. "About what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "This," she said, her gaze never leaving mine. "What we're doing, what this has become." I swallowed hard. "I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think about it." But Elena didn't look away. Her eyes softened, but there was something serious there, something almost pleading. "We can't keep pretending. We're both feeling it, and we can't ignore it anymore." The words hit me harder than I expected. I had been avoiding the truth, pretending that everything would somehow return to normal. But deep down, I knew Elena was right. We couldn't keep going like this. It was eating away at me, and the guilt, the constant gnawing guilt, was becoming unbearable. "I don't know what to do," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I can't keep living like this, pretending everything's fine when it's not." Her hand reached out, gently brushing against mine. The simple touch sent a shock through me, reminding me of the pull that had started all of this in the first place. "Elena, we can't keep doing this. We can't keep hiding," I said, my voice shaking with the weight of everything I was trying to deny. "What if someone finds out? What if this ruins everything?" Her eyes were filled with a mix of sadness and understanding. "I don't know what will happen. I can't promise that everything will be okay. But I can't live like this either. I can't keep pretending that I don't want you. That I don't need you." Her words were a confession, raw and honest. And yet, as much as they tore me apart, they also made my heart ache in ways I couldn't explain. This wasn't just a fleeting attraction. This was something deep, something that neither of us could control. We can't keep doing this, I repeated, my voice growing weaker. We have to stop, before it's too late. But Elena wasn't ready to let go. She leaned in closer, her hand finding mine and intertwining our fingers. The touch was so intimate, so full of emotion, that it felt like the only thing that mattered in that moment. We don't have to stop, she said softly. We just have to be careful, we have to be smart. We can't let anyone find out. I didn't know what to say. The words felt like they were caught in my throat, my mind spinning with 1,000 different thoughts. We were both so desperate for this, for each other, but we were also both so scared of what it meant. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice barely more than a whisper. I don't know what we're doing. But I can't stop. Her eyes softened, and she cupped my face gently. I'm scared too, but I don't want to lose this. Not now, not when we've finally found something real. The words lingered in the air between us, heavy with the weight of the choices we were making. It was dangerous, it was wrong, but it was real. And, for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't want to walk away from it. The rest of the night passed in a haze, as we tried to pretend that nothing had changed, that everything was fine. But nothing was fine, and I knew, deep down, that it couldn't stay like this forever. I was torn between the love I was starting to feel for Elena and the fear that came with it. I didn't know what would happen if we kept going down this path, but the pull between us was undeniable. Every time she smiled at me, every time our eyes met, it felt like I was falling deeper, unable to stop myself. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't want to. The days after that conversation were filled with a sense of inevitability, like a storm on the horizon that you can see coming but feel powerless to stop. The tension between Elena and me had only grown stronger, and even though we tried to act as if everything was normal, the weight of our secret was always there, hanging in the air like a silent specter. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for us to slip, for someone to notice. But in those stolen moments when we were alone, everything else disappeared. There was no guilt, no fear, just the need for each other. Every glance, every touch felt like a spark igniting something far too dangerous to ignore. But I knew we couldn't keep pretending forever. We were walking a tightrope, and every step brought us closer to falling. And yet, when Elena was near, I felt like nothing else mattered. Her touch was all I could think about, the way she looked at me, the way we moved together like we had known each other for a lifetime. It was late one evening when everything changed. My dad had been out of town for a few days, and the house was quiet again, the kind of silence that seemed to echo with the things left unsaid. Elena was sitting on the couch, flipping through a book, and I found myself watching her from across the room. There was something different about the way she looked at me tonight, something in her eyes that I couldn't ignore. It was like she had made a decision, something that had been building for days, maybe weeks. She looked up at me, and our gazes locked. For a long moment, we just stood there, neither of us saying anything, the air between us thick with anticipation. Then, Elena slowly stood up, closing the book she had been holding and walking toward me. My heart raced as she came closer, each step seeming to slow time itself. She reached out for my hand, her touch gentle but firm. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. Elena, I whispered, unsure of what to say, unsure of what we were about to do. Don't, she said softly, her finger gently brushing against my lips. Don't say anything, I've already made up my mind. Before I could respond, she leaned in, her lips meeting mine in a kiss that was soft but full of desperation. It was a kiss that felt like it was long overdue, as if neither of us could go on pretending that we weren't in this together, that we didn't want this. Her hand slid around my waist, pulling me closer, and I found myself following her lead, my body responding in ways I couldn't control. Every touch, every kiss felt like it was setting something inside me on fire. I wanted her, needed her in a way that I couldn't explain. When we finally pulled apart, I was breathless, my chest rising and falling with each quick breath. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions. I didn't know how this would end, I didn't know what would happen if anyone found out, but I couldn't stop myself. I didn't want to stop. I don't know what we're doing, I said, my voice trembling with uncertainty. But I can't keep pretending it's not real. Elena looked at me with a mix of tenderness and resolve. Neither can I, she replied softly. I've never felt anything like this before. And I'm not going to let it slip away. The words hung in the air between us, and for a moment, everything else seemed to fade away. It didn't matter what was right or wrong, what society would think. What mattered was this, the connection we had, the undeniable bond that had formed between us. We spent the rest of the night together, not saying much, just being in each other's presence. The silence felt comfortable, but it wasn't the same kind of silence that had existed before. There was no pretending anymore. No more hiding. This was real, but the reality of our situation was never far from my mind. Elena and I were still walking a dangerous path. The risks of what we were doing were too great to ignore, but at that moment, I didn't care. All I could think about was her, the way she made me feel, the way I felt when she held me, kissed me, touched me. It was everything I had ever wanted and nothing I should have had. The next morning, when I woke up and saw Elena beside me, I felt a pang of fear mixed with desire. We both knew what we were doing wasn't just about the physical connection. It was about something deeper, something that we weren't sure how to define or where it would lead. But the questions, the doubts, were still there, lingering in the background. Could we really keep going like this? Could we continue to live in a world where no one knew the truth? I wasn't sure, but I also knew that I couldn't stop now. Neither of us could. We had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. What started as something forbidden had grown into something that felt far more powerful than either of us had anticipated. As we lay there, tangled in the sheets, neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. We both knew what this meant, and maybe, in that moment, it was enough just to be together. As the days passed, the reality of our situation began to settle in. We had crossed boundaries, and there was no going back. But in those quiet, stolen moments, Elena and I found something in each other that we couldn't deny. Despite the consequences, despite the guilt, we were drawn to each other in a way that no one could understand, not even us. But with every decision we made, we knew the risks were growing. The world outside our bubble was waiting for us to slip, to make a mistake. And while we couldn't stop what had started, we knew we were playing with fire. The question was, how long could we keep it a secret? How long could we keep pretending that everything was normal? But in the end, the choice was ours, to live in the shadows or step into the light and face whatever came our way. Either way, we were bound by a connection that was too strong to break. And that's where our story stands, uncertain, but real. It's a reminder of the power of emotions, the danger of forbidden love, and the lengths people will go to when they find something they can't live without. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Share your thoughts with us. What do you think happens next for Elena and me? Will we face the consequences of our choices, or will we find a way to continue in secrecy? Let us know in the comments below. And remember to hit that notification bell so you never miss another chapter. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.